All right, let's get into it. You know, when you picture a Roman soldier, what comes to mind? Probably some guy marching under a bright Mediterranean sun, right? Well, today we're going to throw that whole image out. We are heading way, way north, to the absolute edge of the empire, into the cold, damp mists of ancient Britain, to see what a Roman soldier's morning really looked like.
Just let that sink in for a second. We're not in Rome anymore. We are right there, on the Caledonian frontier. A place where the wind is your first enemy of the day, and morning doesn't start with sunshine, but with a cold, damp shock to the system. So, first things first, we have to completely reset what we think we know. That popular idea of Roman life, all gleaming marble statues and glorious sun-drenched conquests, that is a whole world away from the day-to-day reality for a soldier stuck on the border of civilization.
Okay, so let's start the clock on our soldier's day. The sun is still a long way off, and the entire world is just wrapped in this thick, gray fog. How does a legionary's day actually begin up at, say, Hadrian's Wall?
There is no gentle wake-up call here. Now, the first thing you experience is basically auditory violence, this piercing, metallic scream from the bucina. It's a sound that's literally designed to slice through the thickest fog and jolt you out of the deepest sleep. It's the signal. The fight for another day has just begun.
And where do you wake up? Not in some fancy villa. You're in a cramped room made of earth and wood, and you're sharing it with 7 other guys, your contubernium. The air is so damp it feels like it's seeping right into your bones. Your very first job is this desperate battle against the frost, just trying to get a tiny fire going, all while you're shivering in a simple wool tunic. This is life before the sun even thinks about showing up.
Now, before a soldier could fight for Rome, he had to fuel himself, and that whole process started with the most basic task you can imagine, making his own food, from scratch.
And this was pure, hard manual labor. Every single soldier got his ration of grain, and using a heavy stone mill, he had to physically grind it down into this rough, coarse flour. From that, he'd whip up a simple porridge called pulse, or maybe a tough sourdough bread. And this wasn't some leisurely breakfast either. It was a quick, silent, get-it-done kind of meal, all about packing in those slow-burning carbs you absolutely needed to survive a day in the freezing cold.
Can you just imagine that smell? That really unique mix of wood smoke from all the little fires, blended with the scent of damp wool from tunics that, let's be honest, probably never ever got fully dry. That was the constant smell of the barracks, a permanent reminder of the cold, wet world waiting right outside the door.
Okay, so his body is fueled. Now the soldier's attention turns to his tools. Because his life doesn't just depend on his own strength. It depends entirely on the condition of his iron and steel.
See, out here on the frontier, the biggest and most constant enemy wasn't some barbarian warrior, it was the air itself. The relentless, corrosive humidity was waging a silent war on every single piece of metal a soldier owned. And if you slacked off in that fight, well, you were just asking for disaster.
And this chart just perfectly illustrates that daily battle. I mean, every single morning, the lorica segmentata, that classic plate armor, had to be checked for any sign of rust. The gladius sword and the pilum javelin had to be methodically cleaned and oiled. You even had to check the iron studs on your caliga sandals. Think about it. A single spot of rust on your sword could weaken the blade, and a weak blade could literally get you killed. This wasn't just housekeeping. This was a life-saving ritual.
So, you're fed. Your armor is clean, your weapons are ready. Now, you step out of the barracks and into that bone-chilling mist. This is where an individual's chores turn into a unit's strength. This is the part of the morning that truly forges a legion, the drill.
And just like that, the atmosphere completely changes. The quiet focus of cleaning your gear is shattered by the sharp, barking commands of the optio. He's the centurion's second in command. Out here, discipline is everything. Every single movement has to be precise, synchronized, and immediate.
And we're not talking about nice, neat parade ground drills. This was grueling practice on frozen, uneven ground, often in visibility so low you could barely see the man next to you. They would rehearse close quarters fighting, practice shifting formations in the thick fog, and perfect that famous tortoise or testudo formation. Every single drill was designed to build muscle memory, so that when a real attack suddenly came screaming out of the mist, their response would be automatic, lethal, and absolutely unwavering.
But beyond all the physical work, just imagine the psychological weight of it all. Standing guard, staring into a solid wall of gray fog.
Knowing that an enemy could be just feet away, totally unseen and unheard. That constant high alert state, always peering into the unknown. That might have been the most exhausting part of the entire morning.
So, now that we've walked through this entire intense morning, let's zoom out a bit. Why does all of this, the grinding, the polishing, the drilling, why does it actually matter in the grand scheme of the Roman Empire?
Well, you have to remember, these men were thousands of miles away from the warmth and comfort of Rome. They were totally isolated at the very edge of their world. They were a thin line of discipline and iron, holding back everything that lay beyond. And that's really the key takeaway here. The Roman Empire wasn't just held together by famous generals or big decisive battles. It was held together by the combined effort of millions of these boring, repetitive mornings. Every single grain that was ground, every spot of rust that was polished away, every drill that was executed perfectly. It was a tiny, essential act that kept the whole frontier from collapsing.
And so, that leaves us with one last question to think about. We always celebrate the great victories and the legendary battles, but what if the real genius of Rome, the true source of its incredible long-lasting power, was its absolute mastery of the daily grind?